we turn to a New York courtroom where closing arguments begin in the rape and sexual assault trial of Harvey Weinstein. More than 2 years after accusations against him launched the global Me Too movement. He denies all the allegations. Douglas Wigdor is an attorney representing one of the women who's testifying against the former Hollywood producer. And he takes us inside the courtroom of what he says has been an emotional trial. Douglas Wigdor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So as the defense rests and as the prosecution gets ready to rest their cases, can you just explain to viewers how it is that it seemed there were dozens and dozens of people who made these allegations as the floodgates opened after 2017, and yet only 2 women are able to bring criminal trials? Tell us what's happened in the big picture.
Sure. In the big picture, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is the gatekeeper. They decide which witnesses they want to call, which witnesses they want to present to the grand jury, which ultimately is the body that brings out an indictment for which Harvey Weinstein stands trial today. And they decided that they thought it was in the best interests of the state, the people of the state of New York, to bring these 2 particular cases. That's Mimi Halei and Jessica Mann. But in addition to those 2 women who Harvey Weinstein stands charged for, there are 4 other women who have also testified in support of their testimony. And those 4 women were very important in this criminal trial.
Okay, so let's talk about that. And I think also some of the reasons for not bringing rape allegations or others is because the statute of limitations has expired, and some of the dozens who've accused Harvey Weinstein fall into that category as well. So let me ask you about your particular client, Tarale Wulff. Now, as you say, she's come almost as a character witness, if I could put it that way. Explain that. How is that allowed in a case where she's not actually bringing an actual criminal case?
Right. So Ms. Wulff and 2 other women, actually, Lauren Young and Dawn Dunning, were allowed by the court to testify. The prosecution had actually sought many more women to testify, but they are testifying essentially to show Harvey Weinstein's intent. So Harvey Weinstein is not charged with any crimes that he committed against these 3 women, but these 3 women can tell the jury what happened to them, and then the jury can infer from that testimony that Harvey Weinstein intended to rape or sexually assault the 2 women for which he's charged. Okay. There's case law that goes way back in New York. It's called Molineux, and this is the type of evidence ultimately that helped convict Bill Cosby. You'll recall that in the first trial in the Bill Cosby case, there was only 1 other woman who testified. That trial ended up in a hung jury. But in the second trial, there were many other women who testified in support of the main victim, and that trial ended up in a conviction. So this evidence is very, very important.
So tell us, just so that we know, what your client alleges about how Harvey Weinstein treated her and why it's significant as a Molineux witness.
Well, Tarale Wulff worked at Cipriani, which is a bar nightclub in downtown New York. And in 2005, she was working there and she met Harvey Weinstein, who grabbed her, took her upstairs, and masturbated in front of her. She threw a towel at him, walked away, and later on, shortly thereafter, she received a call from Weinstein's office, not from him, but from somebody in his office, asking her if she could come in and read for a script. This is sort of his modus operandi that he had done with other women as well who testified in the criminal case. She thought she was going to meet and read a script with somebody else. She didn't even think that Harvey Weinstein would be there. So she arrived at his place of business. She was told that there was a car waiting outside for her, that Mr. Weinstein wanted to see her. Not thinking, again, that she was going to his apartment, thinking that she was going to be at another place of business. She got into the car, she got into the elevator, and she walks off the elevator into this apartment where Harvey Weinstein is. She tries to make some small talk, and then within a few minutes, he approaches her, pushes her down, and sadly rapes her.
As you know, Harvey Weinstein categorically denies all of these allegations of coercive sex or rape. He says everything that happened was consensual. So to that end, the two cases that are being tried, you know, there's a huge amount of, obviously, arguing in court, but also a huge amount of press around, you know, here we go again. The girls, the women, the victims are not being believed because, you know, in some cases they admit to having had relations with him after the alleged attack and friendly conversations by text or otherwise. How difficult is it for a prosecution to get a conviction on the, you know, underlying alleged crime when this is shown to be the case, the aftermath, so to speak, in court?
Well, that's the real question for this trial. I mean, the burden rests with the prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. One of the reasons why they have 6 women testifying is to undermine the defense that all of these women are making something up. And really, while if there were 2 women, maybe that defense would work, that a jury might come away with the conclusion that 1 or 2 women might be making this up. But when you have 6 women, all with similar stories, it becomes much more difficult for the defense to make that argument to a jury. But having said that, they were effective, no doubt, in their cross-examination of many of the witnesses about their relationships with Mr. Weinstein after the incidents in question. And it's really going to be, this jury verdict is going to be a real testament to where we are as a society post-Me Too, and whether a jury can understand that really rape victims often do, and sexual assault victims often do keep in touch with the person that sexually assaulted or raped them, and that the rape myth of being raped or sexually assaulted in a dark alley or at gunpoint is the exception and not the rule, whereas these are more common. And that's what the prosecution expert witness testified to in this case. So whether the jury buys into that argument and whether the jury accepts that in 2020 really is going to be the question of the day.
So it's not just the question of the day, it's the question of the millennium, so to speak. I mean, this Me Too movement was a huge, huge game changer and, you know, almost a consensus builder for women and for men around the country and around the world. It's had a massive impact beyond the dozens of people who've accused Harvey Weinstein. I just want to ask you as a person, you were in the court, you've watched this trial go on, you have a client testifying. What do you feel as a lawyer, as a person? Which way is it going? What do you think the jury's going to do?
Well, I myself am a trial lawyer, and trying to read jurors and their body language is a very difficult task. So I don't think there's anyone in that courtroom, and I've been there many, many days, can predict what this jury will do. I would say this, though, from the beginning of the case till the end of the case, it's been an uphill battle. These cases are difficult to prove under the best of circumstances. Don't forget, in a criminal case, the burden is beyond a reasonable doubt, and they need to convince all 12 jurors. They need a unanimous jury that Mr. Weinstein is guilty for the crime for which he's charged. So it is an uphill battle. But let me also say this. I represent 3 other women in civil cases, and we're waiting for this trial to end so we can continue our journey in the civil cases where the burden is a preponderance of the evidence, 50% or more. And in those cases, Harvey Weinstein cannot invoke the right against self-incrimination. He will have to testify. I will be able to cross-examine him. So whatever happens in this criminal trial, we look forward to holding him responsible, at least in the civil arena.
So that's interesting, because you did actually yesterday write, Weinstein may be able to avoid testifying in the criminal trial, but he will not be afforded that right in his civil trials. I relish the day when I get to cross-examine him and ask him to answer for the wrongs he's committed against so many women. Let me play the other side, so to speak, the defense. Because, as you know, his lawyers have said, oh, he wished he could testify, but prosecution didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Why should we put him up there, et cetera, et cetera. But his actual lead lawyer, Donna Rotuno, has spoken, you know, to the Daily, to the New York Times journalist, Megan Twohey, who broke this entire story, along with Jodi Kantor and also, of course, Ronan Farrow for The New Yorker, just to put all their names out there. But she has a different take, particularly on the women's stories and the women's experiences. This is what she said.
Women cannot be equal if women don't start taking on equal risk. Women want men to take on all the risk. They want to then put themselves in whatever situation they're in and then walk out and say, oh my God, I had no idea that was going to happen to me. You can't have it both ways. And when you're put in circumstances that you think are questionable or negative, or you don't want to be in, or you think this is the only way I'm going to get the job, we know that that's ridiculous. We know that if women stand up and say, I'm not going to take this, I'm not going to do this, you have other options.
And so she's obviously referring to the women who went willingly, including your client, to a hotel room.
Well, my client actually went to Mr. Weinstein's apartment thinking it was his place of business. But, you know, Ms. Rotuno has done an effective job at this trial, and so have her colleagues in cross-examining the victims in this case. But I think she's gotten a little too far in sort of her social, you know, views in terms of where things stand in our society. Blaming women as a whole for going to someone's place of business. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, let us not forget, conducted business routinely from his hotel room and from his apartment. That is a fact. And to suggest that women can't go to somebody's hotel room or to their apartment where men can puts women at a significant disadvantage if they are not to go. So by going to one of these places doesn't mean that you are now submitting to anything that Mr. Weinstein wants to do of a sexual nature. That just can't be the case. And so to blame a woman for going to one of these establishments where he was and under the ruse and guise of conducting business or reading a screenplay was really the power dynamic. He had the power and the ability to get these women to come to his place and to do that. And to suggest that women are to blame, really, I don't think is fair at all.
Give me a sense of the atmosphere in the courtroom. And we here who are sitting outside, here, you know, there's been, you know, raised voices and, I mean, a lot of sort of, you know, a certain amount of high emotion, even on the stand. I mean, you know, naked pictures of Harvey Weinstein shown to jurors. Give me a sense of what it's actually like in the courtroom.
Well, it's a rather routine system. The day begins typically, the prosecutors are there first almost every day. The defense team walks in, then all of a sudden Harvey Weinstein walks in with his walker, shuffles his feet, sits at the table. The judge comes in, they handle some preliminary matters, and most of the courtroom actually is comprised of journalists who have their laptops out. And as the testimony is going on, there is a sense and an overwhelming clicking of the keyboards. Everyone's writing down frantically as much as they can about what the testimony is. The heat is not regulated well. It's an old courthouse. The windows are open. There are sirens in the background, firemen, policemen. The acoustics are very poor, so it's difficult to hear the witnesses speak, even for people who are in the front or front rows, or even for the jurors for that matter. The judge is very matter-of-fact. He's running a very efficient, tight courtroom. And so that's sort of the picture. The witnesses, most of the victims have at one point or another broken down into tears, either on direct examination or cross-examination. So it has been a very emotional trial. It's gone faster than most people had thought because of the judge's efficiency. And what we're waiting for now are the closing arguments and ultimately the deliberations and a jury verdict, which again needs to be unanimous. Otherwise, there would be a hung jury, which would amount to a retrial of this case.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned the civil suit that you're planning to bring, and that is because your clients, I believe, have turned down essentially an attempt to buy them off or whatever, a settlement that amounted to some $47 million.
So this so-called civil settlement, I have been opposed to from day one, because the number that's been quoted in the media actually is very misleading. A lot of that money is going to other creditors. A lot of that money is actually going to the defense teams, believe it or not, is going to pay the lawyers that defended the directors of the Weinstein Company, who we believe were partially responsible for these actions because they knew about Harvey Weinstein's conduct. So millions and millions of dollars are going to them. And then, of course, millions and millions of dollars are going to the plaintiff's lawyers. So at the end of the day, there is very little money that actually are going back to the victims. And I have opposed this because of those things, but also because they want to, as a part of this settlement, give a release of claims to the insurance companies and to the directors. And so people who want to opt out would be left with no place to turn because the insurance companies and the directors are two of the assets that exist. And in addition, I've always been of the view that you can't settle a civil claim before the criminal trial, because if there's an acquittal in the criminal trial and you have settled the civil cases and Harvey Weinstein has accepted no responsibility and has paid no money, then he walks away scot-free. And I'm here to say that my clients, my 3 clients who already have civil claims, have not agreed to any civil settlement because they want to hold Harvey Weinstein accountable. We don't know what's going to happen in the criminal trial, and the civil settlement is completely unfair.
And by the way, we should also say that not just the defense and the prosecution or plaintiff lawyers and all the rest of it, but it's divided out between 30 victims. So, you know, it's, as you say, the numbers start to pale when you see how many people are getting a share of that pie. Just
so I can say on that point, though, actually, just so we're clear, the way that the settlement is envisioned to work is that pot of money, there would be an announcement that there is a civil settlement. And any woman who claims to have been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, no matter when, it could be from the 1990s, 1980s, it could be more recent, then they can come forward. So it could be hundreds of people that would take part in that civil settlement. It could be many hundreds of people. We don't know how many people will come forward. And so when you look at the amount of money that's left over after all of those other people are paid, the lawyers, the other creditors and the like, it would really mean there would be very little left over for the people that participate in the civil settlement if it should go through. And amazingly, the New York Attorney General, who has the power to and has brought a lawsuit against the Weinstein Company, is wanting to settle this case prior to the criminal trial. And so, you know, I hope that this does not happen. I don't think it's going to happen in the days before the verdict. And if there is an acquittal, my hope is that everyone realizes now that we need to, as a group, hold Harvey Weinstein accountable, at least in the civil arena.
Douglas Wigdor, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.
So we contacted Harvey Weinstein's defense attorney, Donna Rotuno, who you heard there, for a response to our interview, and this is part of her statement. There is no excuse for bad behavior, and no one ever deserves to be assaulted or abused sexually, physically, or emotionally. But we each at least have control of our own actions. If women want true equality, they need to take real equal risks and share equal responsibility. That means being willing to say no collectively, risking the chance of not getting that desired opportunity, hence forcing transformations to occur. Here, accusers each wanted something from Mr. Weinstein, whether a chance at fame or fortune or simple access to a world in which they were fascinated. And for that, they became willing, even if melancholic, participants. As I said, the defense is resting its case this week.